while all these things have been going on with the pandemic, there is a change that is currently in process, which is CIP Year 2020. Putting that together for NCES was before COVID-19. And so although things were bumped back a little bit with that changeover for CIP Year 2020 for program reporting, that still is something that's going on concurrently while, going through this pandemic. So the focus of the webinar will be CIP Year 2020. So without further ado, our agenda is we're going to walk through CIP Year 2020, provide some background about that, and what is CIP Year 2020. So to do our best to answer that question, and then Clearinghouse's phased approach with the rollout of enhancements related to enrollment reporting to meet the NSLDS or Department of Ed guidance related to program level reporting for CIP Year 2020. So this is just some background. It's kind of answering that question of what are we even really talking about here? So the CIP is the Classification of Instructional Programs. It's issued by the National Center for Education Statistics, and it's the classification system for programs offered by schools, by post-secondary schools. And so it's meant to be a universal system. So if I take biology at one school and I transfer and take biology at the other school, there's some sort of common ground of how we are identifying what the program of study is for that degree track. So for CIP Year 2020, it actually happens to be the 6th revised CIP code list. And to give you some history, the initial one was published in 1980. And then again, there was a revised one in 85, 1990, 2000. And then most recently, the one we're all accustomed to is 2010. So this big change is now the new revised list is 2020. So roughly every 10 years, they're going to revise the CIP code list. So roughly every 10 years, there may or may not be some impact for your school with how you are making updates in COD, in Common Origination and Disbursement, and for enrollment reporting for NSLDS compliance reporting, which does relate to how you report data to Clearinghouse. If you want more details about that, it is at that nces.ed.gov website that just is source guidance speaking to the Classification of Instructional Programs, or CIP. And then most recently on April 30th of 2020, so just before summer really started, NSLDS published newsletter number 68, and that provided the final details about the new requirements for 2026. So CIP Year 2010 versus CIP Year 2020. And I really love this slide because it gives you an idea of, what kind of changes could be impacting my school, or is my school going to be affected at all, or is my school going to be affected a lot? And so there's a great deal of variance about what degree this will impact your institution, and it all depends on what your course offerings are, what your catalog looks like for the program offering you have for your population at your school. So of the total list between 2010 year's list that we're all accustomed to and the new 2020 list, there are over 1,500 of them are unchanged. So in other words, the CIP code that you would use for the 2010 list is going to be the same CIP code you use for the 2020 list. And then 145 of the CIP codes are actually changing for existing programs. So we've made a lot of considerations to that, considering enrollment reporting behavior and things like that. So we've been factoring all of that in with how we're approaching the adjustment to the changeover with CIP Year 2020, and we'll get into that more on later slides. So 145 of those, and then 459 brand new CIP codes have been introduced on the list, and then they're making 7 of them defunct. So 7 will be deleted between the 2010 CIP year list and the 2020 CIP year list. So let's talk about Clearinghouse's approach and what this means for your school's enrollment reporting to us. We are doing a phased approach. We are currently in phase one. Phase one is complete as of August. And then there's two phases to roll out, phase two and phase three. So for phase one, for schools who have converted to reporting CIP Year 2020 to Clearinghouse enrollment reporting, we're accepting any continuously enrolled student and any new student with the CIP Year 2020 where the CIP code hasn't changed. So the only thing that would be changing for that student when you change over to 2020 CIP reporting to Clearinghouse, the only change would be the CIP Year field is going to now reflect CIP Year 2020. So all other things will be business as usual. The CIP code is not changing, in other words. And then we're also accepting currently new students with CIP Year 2020, where the CIP code is new, moved, or deleted. CIP code from the CIP Year 2010 list to the 2020 list. And we're going to walk through phase one a little bit more too. So phase two, this one is going to be the next one. We're going to send an email notification to those at your institution who are listed on the Clearinghouse, the school's Clearinghouse contact list with a role type. And also we're going to publish it and echo it on our Compliance Central page. So phase two is to come, and you should hear something about that at some point. We don't have an exact date for you yet. We don't have a date quite yet, but as soon as we have a date, we're going to let you know. And so what is phase two going to mean? Phase two is going to mean at that point, we're going to accept continuously enrolled students with a moved or deleted CIP code. So if we go back to this slide, we're talking about these 145 and 459, the new or deleted, okay? And why that's such a critical piece where we underline continuously enrolled. If it's a new student, that's going to be different. So those are going to be fine if you've changed over enrollment reporting for those. So it's where the student is in program A, and program A, they were in it, and you've already reported that student to us in the 2010, reflecting the 2010 CIP code, but their same program A has a new CIP code. So there was a lot to consider for that piece to make sure the functionality is just right. We do have an IT group, development team, IT, if you will, that are devoted to that functionality and rolling out. So again, anything updated related to what we're calling our phase two or phase three of this enhancement, we're going to alert you in email and on our website. When we're talking about this last bullet point here, I want to preface it with this. So currently, what you're sending to us, if you send 2010 or if you send 2020, what it looks like is you're sending us 3 parts to the enrollment record. It's a bundled record situation. NSLDS considers it to be quote unquote a bundle, and basically it's the overall campus level record, which is 001 record type, and the program level record, which is 002 record type, and then 003 record type. And these are all for student A at your school that you send over to us. And the 003 record type is just the email address, contact information, like I think it's phone number for a student. So those are what you are accustomed to sending to us. So NSLDS, they are introducing a new record type. It's 004. This will not change anything with how you report data to Clearinghouse. So the format is not changing. The 004 record type that we are installing enhancements for our quote unquote phase two, that's Clearinghouse only. That's with how we respond to NSLDS on the roster. It is not related to how you send data to us. So I just want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear about that piece, as the 004 record type doesn't have anything to do with you changing your format for how you send data to us. And then phase three, that's going to also be upcoming, and that's the final enhancement close out the changeover from CIP year 2010 to CIP year 2020. And these are going to be the big functionality pieces that will be included in that phase 3 and final enhancement. The first one is for students who are continuously enrolled in a program with a new CIP code introduced in the 2020 CIP list, we're going to accept those. And enabling schools to update program identifiers for students in existing programs. So all enrollment history reported previously under CIP year 2010 will also be moved to 2020 CIP code. So these are the sort of behind the scenes functionality pieces that we're putting in place to continue to take in your data or ingest your data properly and present you with the proper error resolution report to meet your compliance needs. So all of those things are being considered with the introduction of the phase 2 enhancements and the phase 3 enhancements for CIP year 2020. There will also be additional functionality for the 004 record type for phase 3. For the initial rollout of phase 2, let's go back to that slide. In the event the student is not enrolled in the program and they were maybe misreported in that program and you want to report a never attended, then the functionality will be there for that in our phase 2 related to the 004 record type. So that functionality, there'll probably be some pretty great opportunities to leverage that in the event you're trying to make adjustments to what you've reported previously, and when later you determine, you know what, the student was actually not in that program. So it's going to, ideally, it's going to help kind of support making adjustments related to that kind of a situation. And then for the 004 record type, in the phase 3, we're going to expand that so that it will allow you to adjust other program identifiers. So there are multiple criteria that make up a unique program according to NSLDS, and so that's how you report the data to us. And so things like credential level, program length or measurement, and your weeks in Title IV, those functionality pieces, we're going to incorporate those as well to help, better support the process and just to align with everything that's absolutely needed to make the CIP year 2020 transition work as intended and behaviorally be what is expected. Going back to the phase that is in effect, for schools that have converted, where in other words, where you have let us know that you are sending over enrollment to reflect the CIP year 2020 in your enrollment reporting to Clearinghouse, the programs with the same CIP code in both 2010 and 2020, we're simply accepting them. And now we're just flipping the CIP year field to show 2020 instead of 2010. So that's the most straightforward and simplest one, I would say, for all of us to digest, really, is that's a pretty straightforward situation. And the bulk of the CIP codes, as we saw in the earlier slide, they're not changing. It's over 1,500 of them that aren't changing. So as far as when you do change over to reporting reflecting CIP year 2020 to Clearinghouse, there is an error code logic we have in place to alert you of instances where it's a CIP code that is not from the 2010 list. So the 2010 one that we're all accustomed to, we're going to present those records as error 1701 for those specific students. And then the assigned analyst for your enrollment reporting file can work with you in case there is a volume of those, or you might not experience any 1701s. It just depends on your school and your course offerings. But for those, in the interim, we are going to flip those back to 2010 and reflect the 2010 CIP code that corresponds with the 2010 list. So I hope that makes sense. Also, just as an aside, for the NSLDS has not yet released a date for when they will officially move completely to 2020. So that date has not been set or established by the Department of Ed yet. The CIP year 2020, we have all the resources here in just one spot. There are a number of archived ones. They are available on our public site on Client Central, but we started publishing blog posts and emailing schools with these blog posts reflected about just the updates, the anticipatory updates or things that are in effect related to your enrollment reporting and CIP year 2020. And then the department resource from March 18th is also linked down there at the bottom.